Dudes on Movies podcast with your hosts, Scott Charboneau and David Lynn Miller.
Welcome to Dudes on Movies. I'm your dude Scott.
I'm your dude Dave.
And today we're discussing 2001's Wet Hot American Summer, directed by David Wayne and starring Janeane Garofalo, David Hyde Pierce, and Michael Showalter. But before we do that, let's talk about what we've been watching. Dave, what have you been watching?
I watched another Bergman film. This time it was The Hour of the Wolf. Yeah, very good movie. All of his most recognizable techniques and themes are in this one. And even though it's a complicated film, I think it's a candidate for what you'd start someone on if they didn't know anything about Bergman.
Oh, it's entry-level Bergman.
Yes, exactly. And it's weird, entry-level, but still intermediate.
Yeah,
and
because it's Bergman.
Yes, of course, right. Most people's first choice would probably be The Seventh Seal, even though that's kind of advanced stuff. It's kind of his most famous movie. So, you know, it's okay, go with this, But but this one, which is about an artist and his wife living in seclusion, and then, their lives are complicated by these decadent rich admirers. It captures everything that we define as Bergman-esque. And so I think people should just check it out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
I've never seen that one, so now I've got to put it on the list.
Yes.
I checked out a new movie from Michael Keaton called Knox Goes Away. He's starring and directing it.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's about a hitman who's aging, and he is diagnosed with some form of rapid onset dementia where he can't remember stuff,
Okay.
almost like an Alzheimer's.
Yes.
He doesn't know who he is or where he is or what he's doing, just randomly. So you can see why that could be a problem for a hitman.
Yes.
So it's about that, but it's deeper. It's about his past relationship with his son and a few other things, and the cops are trying to figure out what's happening with this hit that went wrong, and it's actually quite tense and very well directed.
Wow.
Michael Keaton, I think this is the second movie he's directed, but he's pretty good.
Yeah.
It slows down at one point where it's okay, what are we doing now?
Okay.
But I think in the end it ultimately redeems itself. So
Good.
Knox Goes Away, everybody.
Nice.
Now, let's talk about Wet Hot American Summer, Dave. Why don't you give everyone a synopsis?
Yes, of course. So this film takes place at a summer camp in 1981, and it's David Wayne and Michael Showalter's parody of 80s teenage sex films. The cast is made up of many famous actors who you've seen in a lot of other stuff, and in addition to parody or satire, it also uses screwball comedy to both tell its story and just make you laugh. And it's another movie that I sort of worried about when trying to figure out how we were going to cover it in our format, but let's give it a try.
Yeah, because the movie's kind of all over the place. There's some through lines, there's A plots and B plots, I guess, but there's just all kinds of interstitials and randomness happening.
Yes, this movie is a series of sketches and can sometimes feel incoherent.
Yes.
But I know it's meant to be a joke, and a lot of the sketches are very funny.
Yeah.
So that might not be good storytelling, but it makes me laugh sometimes, so I can forgive it.
Right. And I've got a lot of notes here, so we'll be able to go through the stories, I think, and
Very
then
good.
touch on some of the jokes and things like that.
Yes.
But this was a pick for me. I threw it on the schedule. I figured, hey, it's summertime. Let's pick a summer movie. So
Yes.
Wet Hot American Summer, here we go. I first saw it about 10 years ago, and I didn't know what to expect from it. I thought, hey, it's just, a boob comedy about summer camp.
Yes.
Like you said, it's a parody of that. I hadn't realized that going in. Mm-hmm. And about after 20 minutes or so, the movie starts to take all these absurd detours that either you're on board with or you're not. The parody is on such a good level, if you ask me. I think they're so smart. There's such lowbrow humor mixed with the most intelligent satire you can think of. And they just do it so well. It has one of my all-time favorite bait and switches, and we'll get to that when we get there.
Okay.
So that's why I threw it on the schedule.
That's good. And I agree with you about the quality of humor here. I mean, it's... And I also agree with you, it's important to note about, whether you're on board with it or you're not, because, it makes you make a choice, in the first half hour.
Yeah.
And I understand people who say, no, this is not for me.
Yeah.
But, if you just give it a shot and you kind of go with it when you recognize what they're trying to do, you get something out of it.
Right. The first 30 minutes of this movie, when I watched it for the first time, I'm like, this is kind of just very generic, 'cause there's funny stuff, and it's... The characters and acting, they're nice and interesting, but it's just very by the book. But little did I know, that's by design.
Yes.
They're joking about that stuff.
Yes, because when the movie opens, I mean, like, you hear the opening strands of, Jane
Yeah.
by Jefferson Starship, and, like, the song has never hit you as hard as it does when you watch this movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so perfectly used, and they show footage of, like, a campfire scene with all the teenage counselors, and there's freeze frames to show you, to introduce the cast.
Yeah.
And if you're seeing this for the first time, now, then you'll be like, oh my God, they're in it. Oh my God, they're in it. Oh my God, it's them. Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's him. You
Yeah.
know, it's just one after the other where you're just like, okay, this is quite a loaded cast. And I like this particular bit of filmmaking in it. I like the use of the freeze frame. I like just every time it gets in between, like, the introducing the actors, you cut away to Elizabeth Banks gyrating a little bit more.
Yes.
Because you need that.
Right, yeah. Because this, like I said, it's that sex comedy that
Yes.
I was expecting. So
Right.
there's the hot girl. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. I think the intro really sets the tone for what you think you're getting into, but not at all.
Right. There is one moment that like telegraphs a big part of the movie in, like, it's a freeze frame where, like, Amy Poehler goes to kiss Bradley Cooper and he turns away.
Yes, that's great. Oh, they're in this movie, by the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Let's talk about the cast real quick.
Sure.
There's Janine Garofalo, David Hyde Pierce, Michael Showalter. We've said that. But then there's Marguerite Moreau, Paul Rudd, Zach Orth, Christopher Maloney, 80 Miles, Molly Shannon, Ken Marino, Joe Latrulio, Michael Ian Black, Amy Poehler, Bradley Cooper. I mean, Elizabeth Banks. It goes on and on.
Yes.
It's a who's who, and this was 2001. So
Right.
some people were already doing some things.
Yes.
Like, especially David Hyde Pierce. I mean, he was at the height of Frasier, I think.
I guess, was he the biggest star in that moment? Probably. Either him or Janine Garofalo.
Yeah, Garofalo or Maloney, maybe.
Yeah, maybe Malone, because
Yeah.
Law and Order had already started, and he'd been in Oz already, and yeah.
Yeah, I watched some behind the scenes, and Janine Garofalo said that when David Hyde Pierce and Christopher Maloney were doing scenes, everyone came and watched.
Okay.
They were like, we've got to see them do their thing
Yes.
because they're that good.
Right.
And they are.
I
They're
know.
all great, and they're in roles that are against type.
Especially David Hyde Pierce.
Yes.
Even though he gets to be a scientist, he's not playing what he usually
not
plays.
Niles Crane.
No, he's not Niles Crane. Like, this and his role in Nixon are my two favorite movie performances that he gives.
Yeah.
And like, here, he gets to be an intellectual who's also kind of a shithead, who's also just like kind of a screw up too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And he's got this great mustache, and it's a different look for what you're used to with him.
Yeah.
And he's the romantic lead also.
It's great casting.
Yeah.
This movie got, I guess, really lucky getting all these great people. It's a murderer's row
It
of
is.
great comedic actors and just great actors in general.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean,
And I know that, like, I don't know if the state had already, no, the state hadn't happened, but like there was the comedy troupe that, like, Michael Showalter and Michael Ian Black and David Wayne had. I don't know how famous they got but, you know, like, obviously they made a lot of contacts and they met a lot of people who ended up, you know, doing all their stuff.
right.
you
And
know?
they probably knew everybody. Like, oh, let's
Yes.
see if we can get this person. Oh, yeah, let's see if they want to do it.
Yep.
And it worked out really well for them.
Right.
Unfortunately, the movie, when it came out, I know, was a big flop.
Yes.
Commercially and critically. Like, critics didn't get it at the
Right.
time. And we've talked recently a lot about cult movies. This became a very cult movie.
Yes, I think a lot of people discovered it on video after the theatrical run.
Yeah, I think it was on Netflix when they first started up with streaming, and that's where I first saw it.
So
was
did
like,
I.
Oh, well, I think that gave it the new audience that it needed. And Netflix went on to produce another miniseries based on this because of it.
Did you watch it?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so it's called The First Day of Camp.
Yeah.
The first miniseries is a prequel to Wet Hot American Summer. And, like, there's a joke about, you know, they kind of make reference to it like, hey, we're all 15 years older, but we're playing like we're 2 months younger than the characters we were.
right.
And it's real obvious, and it just gets rolled up into the comedy of the
And that's
thing.
a joke they do in this movie.
Yes.
Like, Katie at one point's like, I'm only 16. And you're like, okay, you're 28.
I know, exactly. You're obviously not 16. And the other thing, too, is that, like, about the miniseries, though, I know we want to talk about the movie, but the thing I guess there are some funny moments in it. It'll make you laugh a couple of times. But I guess what I don't like most about it is that it kind of goes with like today's mentality. You know, instead of making movies, let's draw this out.
Okay.
You know,
so just a bunch of riffing.
a bunch of riffing, a bunch of filler. I mean, you know, like John Benjamin is in the movie, and we get to see, you know, how he became the can of vegetables.
Yeah.
And
wow.
Yeah.
So you're talking about that with the miniseries, not
yes.
the original movie.
No, yeah, the miniseries is what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I don't like how we take something and we have to make everything into an expanded universe.
Yeah.
And not just like we make another movie. If they made a sequel to the movie, or if they made a prequel film about the first day of camp, and I'd be totally down for that. And I did watch the whole miniseries, but I don't like the way everything has to be. There's a lot of like stuff in there that we could have done without, and it's not something you were ever even curious about.
Right. We don't need to know how Han got the Millennium Falcon from Lando.
You certainly don't.
Yeah, we don't need to see that.
And I mean, like, if you read all those books, fine, but it's weird. I have not seen any of the Star Wars stuff, like the series. I just haven't watched it.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's okay. You're not missing out.
Right.
So, the movie, I'm glad it got a second life because I think it's a great film.
Yeah, and it's definitely worth seeing. I mean, like, the cult thing, too. We talked about cults on the Rocky Horror episode, how, like, whenever studios try to make cult films, no, you can't do it. Like, that's not how that works. It has to become a cult film on its own.
Exactly. And I think what makes a cult film so good is because it's when someone has a real idea and real conviction about what they're trying to do. And if someone tries to stop it or change it, no, we're going with what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Failure or millions of dollars, you know, we're going with it.
David Wayne and Michael Showalter apparently like grew up this way. Like they were the kids at the camp in 1981. David Wayne, especially, he grew up in Cleveland, and you know, he went to a summer camp for Jewish kids every year of his life. You know, it just was he did that all the time, and so did Showalter. You know, in where he was growing up. And they had, obviously, some experience with this scenario, and they must have really admired the camp counselors because, you know, you would, as a little kid, I want to be just like them.
You look up to them.
Yeah.
They're just big kids, really.
They're big kids who are more attractive than you and who know more about life, and, you know, you're admiring their beauty, and you don't have it yourself, and it's a weird place to be.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not a kid anymore, Dave.
Same here, yeah, right.
I actually just got back from a summer camp. My son is in the Boy Scouts, and we went to the Camp Han at Lake of the Ozarks. And so I was outdoors for 6 days straight. And so if I sound a little different, it's because I've been exposed to something in nature, everybody. But no, it's a good time, you know.
Yes.
I got to see a horse and shoot a bow and arrow.
Was it a wild horse?
No, we went to some ranch. It was some merit badge horsemanship.
Got it.
I saw a bunch of horses.
Okay.
But it sounded funnier to say it that way,
I
right?
saw a horse.
Anyway, you want to get into the movie?
Let's talk about the movie.
We kick it off with the party like we described.
Yes.
And introduced to every character. And we find out it's the last day of summer camp. I guess the next morning it's the last day of summer camp. Everyone's waking up. Boys are sneaking out of the girls' bunk, you know, going back to theirs. And Janine Garofalo is sitting there, and she's very apathetic. She says, "You're not supposed to be there." And like, waves her hand. You know, she's having her morning coffee, and she looks across the way, and there's a gentleman in another cabin, which is right next to the camp, I'm assuming.
Yeah, almost on the campgrounds.
Yeah, I guess. But it's David Hyde Pierce. He plays Henry, and they look at each other kind of like they want to talk to each other. They're attracted to each other, but they're both too timid almost to do it.
Right.
And David Hyde Pierce spills his coffee on himself and makes a fool of himself. And eventually she goes over there. Her name's Beth in the movie. And they start talking, and she wants him to come and talk to the kids because she finds out he's a scientist. Like, he's a professor at some college.
Yeah, college nearby.
And she says, "You should come teach the kids." And he's like, he keeps saying no, and eventually he's like, "No, I said fucking no." He says something like that, right? He goes really off on her.
Right. He just all of a sudden has this moment of, like, you know, rage. I said no, you know, and it's like, and she just walks away kind of like, okay, sorry, dude, you know.
Yeah,
and he realizes he messed up.
Yeah. And he throws his coffee mug out of frustration, and you get the first of many glass shatter sound effects.
Yes.
And on multiple viewings, you'll start picking up every one of these. But until probably the midway point of the movie, you don't realize that they're throwing these in everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Just for no reason.
Yes.
Because it's just absurd.
Yes, the absurdity of the comedy I really appreciate, because when you do it well, I've seen some bad absurd comedy.
Oh, yes.
You know, and when, but it's that half hour scale that we talked about, you know, like you kind of know right away, okay, yeah, these people, they know what they're doing.
Yeah. So that's the first story. There's a bunch of storylines.
Yes.
So that's the first one. Their romance, right?
Right.
And then we also get introduced to Katie, played by Marguerite Moreau, and Qube, who's Michael Showalter. They're both counselors that are there. And you also meet Andy, I think his name is, Paul Rudd.
Yeah.
Who's in this movie.
Right. And Paul Rudd, I think, are Paul Rudd and Marguerite Moreau like tongue kissing? Like, is that the first time we see them?
Yeah. They are literally tongue
Yes.
to tongue on camera.
It is a close-up, of like tongues flailing. And
Yeah.
it's the first of like several times where we see that with Paul Rudd and other cast members.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's meant to gross you out, because that's how high school kids like to kiss each other, because they're still discovering how you do it.
Right.
And yeah, just this kind of public displays of affection, it's rough when it's not you.
They're like out in the field with hundreds of people around. Just they don't care.
I know. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think while we're seeing this, there's the one kid who's the DJ, I guess, at
We hear him, right? Arthur,
and he's talking about how it's the last day of camp, and if you haven't found that special someone, it's your only chance.
I take a lot of issue with kids like Arthur,
Yeah.
Who are the DJ at the camp or the school or the dance or whatever it is, who are always encouraging you to find love, when they gotta know that there's like 80% of the kids aren't finding love, you know?
And they don't want to.
No.
Like half of them probably don't care.
Right. There's that too. Yeah. Yeah. Or they are just like wanting to be, you know, cool enough to have a
Right.
guy or girl, but they just don't.
And Arthur, I'm assuming he's probably like a 12-year-old kid, right?
Yes.
So he's just at like that puberty age where he's thinking about girls. So he's saying what he thinks he should be saying through this
course.
microphone.
And the idea of like him telling others to you know, make it happen. Oh, come on, dude.
Hey, this guy is just he's getting his dreams out there.
Yeah,
you know, because
right.
he wants some love for sure.
He does. He wants some love. He also wants to be Rick Dees when he grows up, probably. And so
Yeah.
this is his chance to, like, you know, get his chops going.
He's a happy Harry hard-on for sure.
There you go.
That's what he reminded me of. Christian Slater, dude.
That's true. Right.
Except he's definitely no Christian Slater.
Right. He's not changing the world like Happy Harry Hardon or Christian Slater.
Right, exactly. So I mentioned Qube is there also. Katie is done slopping with Paul Rudd and goes over to Qube and starts talking to him like, hey, you were watching me make out with Andy, weren't you? You loved it. And she's teasing him about this.
Yes.
And he's like, okay, I get it. Shut up, okay? And apparently this is the first time they've talked, really?
It's weird.
Is weird.
I got the sense that like maybe she has always, like caught him observing them. You know?
They seem like they're great friends already
Right.
from this interaction.
And she knows that maybe Qube definitely, you know, probably likes her a lot. And
yeah,
you
it's
know,
pretty obvious.
it is really obvious.
Yeah.
And when you're that young, you do a lot of bad stuff to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, when someone likes you and you just, you know, God. Look, well, it never happened to me. I never knew somebody liked me, and I, you know, carried on in front of them with somebody else. That's really uncool.
Yeah.
And what she's doing is not cool. And Andy's an asshole. And
Yeah.
Katie, you know, it's although Qube is a desperate jackass, because when she walks away, he's like saying, he's making kind of bland pleasantries with her, and then when she's out of earshot, he goes, "I want you inside me."
Oh, I'm not a fan of that joke, honestly.
No.
I think it just seems so out of place. I don't know. Maybe it just because it reminds me of, I don't know, that time,
Yeah.
early aughts,
Yeah.
was just filled with those kind of jokes where you just randomly say something, be like, oh, I didn't say anything. I don't know. Maybe I'm just oversaturated on that joke.
Okay, so what about like the rest of like pretty much all of 80 Miles and Chris Maloney's, like the sex perversion stuff?
I like that one because of Chris Maloney.
Okay.
And because Gary, 80 Miles' character is just not taking the bullshit. I love his response to it. I just like that dynamic.
Okay.
This is just like someone yelling something random and then saying, "Oh, I didn't say anything."
I know what you mean now. Yeah. Okay, I get it. Yes. The joke also makes no sense.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the joke, actually.
Okay, yeah. Right. Right. So it's wow, it's got a lot going for it.
He doesn't even know how to say something perverted. He says it wrong, right? I want you inside me.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I guess she could.
Well, I mean, yeah, conceivably she could insert things into Qube, but it's just a weird thing to say, in that scenario.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one storyline we've got going here. Another one, you've just mentioned Gene. That's Chris Maloney's character. He's like a Vietnam vet who's the chef in the mess hall.
Yep.
And he's always wearing this crop top t-shirt and a bandana.
Yep.
And dude, he is so funny. I think it's just the performance. If this was not Christopher Maloney, I don't think I'd like it as much.
Well, at the crescendo of his performance, I think that only he can pull that off.
With the fridge?
Yes.
Yes.
Because anybody else, it would have gone on too long. And because it's Chris Maloney and he's got such a different persona that you know him from.
Yeah.
I mean, he totally commits to this weirdo who's shell-shocked and just, in a definite bad state mentally.
Yes.
But like this is probably 2001 stuff again. This is how we would joke about somebody with like massive PTSD. Yes.
Yes.
And make him into he just almost, it's also the only problem I have with this bit, I guess, is that it just like when people would portray Tourette syndrome in movies around this time, like Deuce Bigalow would.
Yeah.
It's always the most stereotypical and obvious, thing of, oh, he shouts obscenities or, racial slurs. In this case, he says under his breath, or he says actually out loud what you're supposed to say under your breath.
Yeah.
Which actually maybe you're even supposed to internalize it,
right.
I'm going to go fondle my sweaters, he says, or I'm going to go rub mud on my ass.
Yeah. Literally saying those things. I'm going to go hump the fridge. Yes. And the joke is every time he says that, Gary's like, "What'd you say? You said you're going to rub mud on your ass?" Yes. He's like, "No, I said I'm going to have blood in the grass." Like he always tries to cover it up somehow.
And my favorite one is like the third one maybe, where he I think he does the fondle my sweaters thing.
Yes.
And he tries to cover it was, no, that's not. No, I said I was going to make fondue cheddar. That's what I'm making tonight for supper. We're making fondue cheddar. And Gary says, that is not what you said, Gene.
Yes.
It's a great 80
I love
miles
how Gary just calls him. He's
Yes.
just not taking it. He's spent 2 months in this kitchen with his asshole.
Oh my God.
And he just is done.
Yes, he's had it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's excellent.
I love how all the characters interact with each other. They
Right.
all seem to be friends in a way, even when there's all these altercations,
Well, and that might be because they were all, I think most of them were just friends in real life.
Probably, so that helps with the performance.
Yes,
but I
and the
also think
chemistry.
it's true to life with going to a summer camp for months and meeting people, and that's your family for that time.
Did you ever go to this kind of summer camp?
I've never been to one like this.
Okay, me neither. Yeah.
It's always
for
been
2
kind of
months.
like some weird fantasy land that I don't know if it really exists.
I know, same thing. People would come back in September at school and be like, "Oh yeah, I was at Camp Wana Wana for however long." I was like, "What? Where does this even exist?
Where did you play Nintendo?"
Yeah,
Come on.
It's weird with me because I did have there was a few times where I was sent to a week-long camp that was associated with my church.
Yeah.
But it was a week, and you came back and that was that.
Yeah, this is literally the entire summer.
Right.
You're gone.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they still exist.
Oh, they
but
definitely
it was
do.
Definitely more popular 40, 50 years
Yes.
ago. So we get more characters now.
Yeah, right.
We get Amy Poehler and Bradley Cooper, everybody. Susie and Ben. They're like this yuppity, preppy couple. And I'm assuming they're some Christian couple. I don't know. I get that Amy Poehler seems like one of those Christian ladies.
It's hard to say.
But it is hard to say because she doesn't act very Christian.
No, she never makes any reference to Christianity.
It's very Tracy Flick from Election.
Yeah, that's right. She's more of an overachiever, I think.
That could be it.
Yes. And Bradley Cooper's Ben is her smiling sidekick who kind of, amplifies everything she says and agrees with her a lot and is I think she thinks that they're boyfriend and girlfriend for a while.
Yeah. So they're doing a choreography for some dance at the talent show.
Right.
And they're recruiting people. And Amy Poehler is all just like, everyone here fucking sucks. Like, she's constantly saying stuff like that, but I'll just have to deal with it.
Right.
You know, and she's an auteur, you know.
Oh,
like,
yeah. She's like Bob Fosse, you know.
Yeah.
And she's real vicious about stuff. I mean, when she criticizes people's dancing, I mean, she just full on, you guys suck dick.
Yeah,
you know?
right. She says that at the talent show.
That's right.
She comes out before the play happens, and she goes, just want to let you know that everyone here sucks dick. It's so funny.
It's great. Yes.
And Bradley Cooper, he doesn't say much in the movie, you know.
Yeah.
So he's just kind of her number two. Like,
Yes.
it's just dog on a leash almost.
I mean, yeah.
But he's producing everything.
Right.
So whatever she says producing, he's like, She's like, oh, yeah.
Yes.
It's pretty good.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot that goes on with Bradley Cooper later that I love.
Right.
We also have Molly Shannon as Gail, who's the divorced mid-30-year-old woman, I guess.
Yeah.
Dealing with it. And there's a young kid named Aaron who is consoling her throughout the movie.
So, Molly Shannon and Aaron. Gail is her name. Okay, the whole joke of, like, Molly Shannon's character, Gail, is that she is confiding in these kids about, like, her divorce.
Yes.
And how she's coping with it.
Which is funny.
It's a very funny idea. And,
Yeah.
and Molly Shannon, she's an excellent comedian. She just is great.
She crushes this.
Yes,
Yeah.
she's so good. And, like, when we keep, like, cutting between all the stories, and every time we cut back to her, she's kind of getting deeper into, like, the emotional core of what she's feeling and everything. And the kids are all very well adjusted.
Right.
And they're offering great advice. In particular, this kid, Aaron.
It's all therapy level stuff.
Yes.
At one point, Aaron is massaging her back and stuff, and she calls his hands magic, and you're like, well, that's a little too far, isn't it?
You know, even if they didn't do the thing at the end,
Yeah.
I still went, what is happening in this scene?
Exactly.
You know, because it's a real sensual neck rub.
Right.
And, like, not only is it weird for the movie, but, like, the kid, Aaron, is played by a kid, Gideon Jacobs, who is 12 years old, and he is, like, pawing all over this lady.
Yeah.
It's really happening.
It's I think it's the one thing I would change about this movie. Well, there's one more thing I could think of.
Okay.
But I actually feel like it's slightly more justified than this.
Right.
Yeah, and at the end, we'll spoil it, I guess. They end up together. They're going to get married. They're like leaving camp arm in arm, saying that they're going to have a housewarming party or some shit.
Yes. And they're talking to, like, other couples, and it's accepted.
Janine Garofalo says, they say they're going to have a shrimp cocktail party or something. She's like, well, I hope they're not jumbo shrimp because I'm allergic to contradictions.
Right. And they all have, like, a cocktail party laugh. Oh, yeah.
Which, that's the joke itself, is that they're doing that.
Right. It's really weird, and, man, they shouldn't have been doing that.
They shouldn't have.
You know?
But they did.
Yeah.
And I know this is a parody movie, so maybe they're trying to make light of something. I have no idea.
Right.
But it's the worst part of the movie.
Yeah, it
honestly.
is. Yeah, even like that they go that far with it is definitely the worst part of it. If it was just the joke of, like, the kids are all, like, doing group therapy,
right,
and they're wise.
I love that.
You know,
it's because
really
it's reversing
funny.
roles,
Yeah.
right? Like the adult should be the one, you know, helping the child with their emotions,
right?
Not the other way around.
That's a good joke.
It's a great joke.
Yeah.
And the performances are great.
Mm-hmm.
They're all good. Even the kid, Gideon Jacobs, like he's a good actor.
He really nails it. I mean, like, and he's speaking authoritatively in these counseling sessions, and you believe him.
Yeah.
You know?
And even later, her husband Ron shows up, and they're like all like nodding to her, like, yes, you can do this. Like they've practiced like the phone call where she says she's not doing it anymore. She's like, I don't need you anymore, Ron. I have plenty of woulda, coulda, shouldas. And like she says all this stereotypical romance dialogue, which that's part of the joke too.
Yes.
And then he goes away and everyone cheers for her.
Right. Ron was played by Judah Friedlander.
Yes, he's in the movie too,
Yes.
everybody.
Another big face.
Gosh.
You know, big name, I should say. Big
Yeah,
face.
Well, it counts. I'll
Sure.
count it.
Yeah, there you go.
And the last few people we should mention, it's Victor and Neil. Victor played by Ken Marino, and Neil is Joe Latrulio. And Abby played by Marissa Ryan.
Right.
The three of them. Victor is this kind of tall, handsome jock kind of guy who's got it all and has all the chicks. He's always flouting it and saying like, I get all the women. Neil is just some other dude who's just down to earth.
Yes.
Who seems pretty cool.
And he hangs around Victor because he thinks Victor's awesome.
Yeah, he idolizes this guy who just gets tons of women, and that's what Neil wants, I guess.
Dude, and I know that Ken Marino's costuming is supposed to be a joke, but I almost can't even look at it for comedy purposes because he just looks so gross.
I was going to say he looks cool.
Oh, dude, no. He's got like that hair that like Adrienne Barbeau had in Creepshow.
Oh, my God.
I mean,
maybe that's why I like it.
Oh, that's right. You did enjoy that hair. I was doing it for you.
I think she wears the same shirt as this, too. No, she doesn't. But, yeah, he does look like kind of a creep and a sleaze.
Yes, with the cutoff shorts and the tank top. And, I mean, yeah, he just, it's not good.
Yeah, it's like a Richard Simmons haircut
It
on
is.
this guy.
Yeah, totally. That's what it is.
So they have to drive a bus of, like, younger kids to some river or something for the day. Like, they have a day trip planned. And Abby shows up and kisses Victor and is like, hey, I want you tonight. And he's like, I can't. I got to drive these kids here. And she grabs him by the crotch and lifts him in the air.
Great gag.
It's like, what's happening? Again, this is one of those like subtle moments where you're like, what kind of movie am I watching?
I know.
This is like absurdist humor.
Because she's lifting him off the ground.
This is not the Naked Gun.
No,
know?
but it turns into it.
Right.
Becomes Naked Gun for like just a couple minutes at a time.
Yeah. So he's like, okay, I'll be back tonight. Wait for me. And so that's another story that's happening here.
And Janeane Garofalo had like assigned him this task, like Victor and Neil.
Yeah.
On the last day of camp, they have to take these kids. I understand like Victor being pissed off about this float trip, man.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a 2-hour drive and then all those shitty kids and you got to be back the same day? Fuck that.
They got to be back the next day. So they're like doing an overnight float or some shit.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah, right.
So my last day of like actually trying to, I mean, look, if it's your last day of camp and you're one of the counselors, maybe now is when you're going to make your move. You're going to like actually ask you're going to sit next to Elizabeth Banks at the talent show, and but no, I have to go on this goddamn float trip.
Man, so we catch up with Beth and she's talking to Katie about how to get hot, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Janeane Garofalo, dude, you don't really need any help.
I don't know if that's part of the joke too, but it's she always played characters who claimed they weren't sexy.
Yeah, I don't know why.
And Janeane Garofalo is like just conventionally attractive.
She's always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
I don't get it. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, every guy I knew, myself included, was crushing on Janeane Garofalo throughout the 90s. And they just made her into like, oh no, I'm not good looking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah,
I don't get it. But she asks Katie for help, and she does her hair with mousse. Janeane Garofalo is just completely clueless on hair products and like what to wear. I guess right. But anyway, she gets a makeover, I guess, and goes to David Hyde Pierce and is like, hey, how you doing? Because he shows up to camp and he's going to start teaching the kids.
Yeah, he's the change of heart.
Yeah, he shows up and he's like, yeah, I was an asshole. So they hash it out here and they start talking and they both like each other. And there's something blossoming here. And
I liked when he walked into the mess hall and asked for like directions of like, where he could, he's like, how do I find, the kids who are maybe, where's the indoor kids? And
the other guy at the table's like, oh yeah,
they're right over there. Yep. And he goes to the place where all the nerds are, and he knows that these are the guys I'm going to teach.
There's the one girl wearing the Cure shirt.
Yep.
She's credited as Cure Girl.
Cure Girl. Right.
I love it.
Yep.
So yeah, she's kind of like, oh yeah, he actually came.
Yep.
That means he does want to, maybe he likes me.
And there's also like a gag in their relationship where they're both secretly studying each other's professions.
Yes.
Because Janeane Garofalo is the director of the camp. That's her actual job. And so, like, Henry starts reading about the history of summer camp, and Beth starts reading about astrophysics.
Yep.
And they start making these like kind of what they're trying to pass off as like casual comments to each other, but really they're just, like
scripted lines they prepared. Yeah.
And they're both incredibly fascinated with one another's, like knowledge of their vocation,
Yeah.
It's good.
It's awesome. So it's good to see them. Something starts to happen with this,
And I guess that's really a good way of like turning the romance on its ear. Like the conflict happens when they meet with one another in the first scene. Like that's when we get the 5-minute wait.
True.
The rest of the movie, they're like just stars in their eyes. I
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And this whole that like puts that convention on its head, right? And the whole movie is basically that. Turning conventions on its head.
You're right, because there's a massive one later on, the most famous one probably.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite one.
Yes.
If I know what you're talking about.
Yes, I'm pretty sure you do.
It's the one with Bradley Cooper, Michael Ian Black.
Oh, actually, no.
Or is it something else?
No, it's something else.
Okay,
it's with Qube and Katie.
Okay, so that's a good one too.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, they're everywhere,
right.
People. At this point, Beth has to go into town to get some supplies and stuff. And I think this is the moment we've been hinting at where you're in or you're out.
Right.
She pulls up in the truck like, hey, I'm going into town. And then all these other counselors are like, we're going into town. And they jump in the back of the truck,
Yes.
And it's like playing, I forget what song it is, but some rock and roll, party song.
Right.
And they're all like, yeah, we're going in. And they get there and it's a montage of them getting some ice cream, they're smoking cigarettes, having fun in the town, getting some beer, hanging out, buying some weed.
Sure.
And then it devolves into them buying a pound of crack from some guy in the alley.
Whew.
And Katie is snorting it to make sure it's good. And they end up in some crack den.
Uh-huh.
And there's people on the floor all strung out. Amy Poehler's like bleeding from the eyes. It's like, what is happening in this movie right now? It's like Train Spotting just showed up.
Yes, it is, because they all start shooting up too.
Yeah.
Like they're sitting there just like all wrecked in a corner, and they're at Mother Superior's at one point.
They beat up an old lady.
They do. Yes. Right. And this is all like Love Is All Right Tonight by Rick Springfield. Like it's just a montage of like these adventures.
Yes, it's a good fun time in town, And we see this happen, and all of a sudden they're driving back into camp.
When it's over, it's over.
It's literally like a 1-minute scene.
Yeah.
And they drive back into camp, and then JJ jumps out. I forget who plays JJ.
Zach Orth.
And he's like, man, it's always great to go into town, even if it's for an hour.
Yes.
And it's like, we just saw 2 weeks worth of depraved behavior.
I know.
In 1 minute, and it's only 1 hour of in-movie time.
Right. They pass it off as just like this is a passing thing that they just do. That when they go into town, they get loaded. They get like, and they commit crimes.
Go on benders.
Yes, totally. It's very funny.
It's amazing because this is one of the most subversive jokes I've ever seen.
I mean, when they get to the point where there's like an actual, like someone's just like tying off their elbow, I'm just like, no, they're not doing this.
They are not doing this.
Yeah.
Marguerite Morrow's like on that couch, kind of like sprawled out with her arm hanging off onto the floor. It's like, holy shit, what's happening? It's so good.
Man, it's great.
Yeah. So we're back at camp, and at this point, I think Victor and Neil get to the river, and Victor tells Neil, I got to go. I got to get back to Abby because I'm going to get laid tonight. Yes. And Neil's like, why? You don't need to. You get laid all the time. And he's like, I got to tell you, I'm a virgin. And Neil's like, what? No. He's so distraught.
He calls him a loser like 6 times.
Yeah, he constantly calls him a
You're
loser.
such a fucking loser, he says. And meanwhile, he's
probably
as
a virgin too.
Absolutely.
But he's not lying about it, at least.
But he had thought that Victor had all this stuff going on, and he did. And it's also like, I think this is the first instance where like one of the kids gets thrown out of the van.
Yeah. A kid says something like, are we there yet?
Yes.
And then you see the van from behind pull to the side real quick, like,
yes.
And like the door opens and a kid comes flying out onto the curb.
Dude, is it a dummy?
It looks like a real kid.
It looks like there's a stunt kid.
Yeah, it's got to be like a stunt person who looks like a kid,
I mean, they're not driving 2 miles an hour. I mean, they're not flying down the road or anything like that.
Right.
But like, there's impact, and like the kid like lands face down in the grass and like rolls a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's impact, and he felt that stunt.
It's awesome because they do another one. Is it when Paul Rudd is making out with Elizabeth Banks?
I believe it is,
because he
yes.
lets some other kid drive a speedboat,
Right.
and then the kid comes back and he jumps in the water. He's like, "Andy, I'm drowning. Andy, help me, I'm drowning."
right.
And he's like, "Shut up." So the kid drowns, and then this other kid's like, "Andy, I can't find my buddy." And so then Paul Rudd looks at Elizabeth Banks and says, "I'll be back." And then you see the van again go, throw a kid out. It's like, what? The movie has completely shifted gears. It's just going in this direction I didn't expect.
Exactly. And I think that like earlier when Beth first came into the mess hall after she had her first encounter with Henry that didn't go so well.
Yeah.
She made some announcement or said something to the counselors about like some kids who were like stuck on the obstacle course, and she meant to like have them like check on them 3 days ago, and it didn't happen.
I missed that line.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Man.
Oh my God. So whenever Victor tells Neil this and he's going to leave, Neil's not going to let him. He says, "You're making a big mistake." A big mistake. And the camera is like kind of zooming up into his face.
Yes.
So the van peels out and goes with Victor in it. And then we see Neil floating down the river with the kids. And he's like, "We've got to get Victor. We've got to get Victor." And the kids are like, "We got to get him." And he's like, "All right, I'm going to get him. You kids stay here." And he jumps out of the raft as the raft continues.
Yes.
And he runs through the woods. And like right there's a motorcycle and he steals it. And then we get a sequence of him chasing down Victor. Victor crashes the van and gets out on foot randomly.
Yes.
And then this motorcycle, which is obviously being pulled behind a trailer or something because of the way the shot is.
Oh yeah.
And that's part of the joke, right?
Yeah, it's a real obvious that he's not really driving this motorcycle.
Right. And then when you see it actually driving, it's a stuntman driving it with
Yes.
a wig. It's
Like,
an
and
obvious stuntman.
And he's in focus.
yes.
Yeah, it's
And
funny.
that's part of the joke.
Yes.
And it's just absurd because there's sequences of him like trying to grab him. He's like that close to him.
Right.
And he's just missing. But then there's a bale of hay in the middle of the road.
Yes.
And he has to make a leap over it. Like Victor has to jump it. And he does like this really lame jump in slow-mo. And then Neil cannot get past the hay bale.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Damn, thwarted."
yes.
It's ridiculous.
So your description of this sequence, I found funnier than the actual sequence.
I agree.
Um,
yes.
This was one bit I was like, okay.
It went on for too long, too.
I looked at my watch. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, guys, come on now. Like Ken Marino at one point is just like, he's running down the road and you hear like the slap of his sandals, you know? And because he's got that ridiculous wig on,
Yeah.
like the sight gag of him, I think Ken Marino is a really funny guy in general, and this performance in particular, because he commits to being this weirdo. So
Yeah.
he's just so into it. He can make me laugh just by looking at him sometimes. And when he for somehow like psychs himself up to make this run, to keep running. I don't know what for. I know he's trying to get back to be with Marissa, Marissa Ryan. But I know what his motivation is. But the execution of it, whatever joke they were going for, it just didn't quite land for me, other than Ken Marino looks funny in this costume,
Yes, I agree. This is a weaker joke in
Yes.
the movie.
Yes.
I do like parts of it more than other. Like, I do like how they just abandon the kids in the river. That's funny.
That is funny. And there are
And he
components
says, "Stay
of it.
here."
Yes.
That's great.
And I like that the river is like not actually flowing. It's just kind of like the river is going underneath them, but they're stagnant in the raft.
Yeah.
That's funny. I like that there's just randomly a motorcycle that he can steal. There were parts that were potentially a good joke. It just didn't really land.
I didn't find the hay bale thing very intriguing, honestly.
It was weird, but wasn't really funny.
Yeah.
You know?
I think we've seen some absurd things at this point. This one was more absurd than anything else we've seen.
Yeah.
Because it's even doing meta stuff, like seeing the stuntman in focus.
Right.
Which we hadn't seen before.
Uh-huh.
And it just upped it further than we have been doing it.
Yes.
And I don't think it works as well.
No,
I
agree.
but there's still layers of humor that are funny in it.
Yep.
But overall, not the best joke in the movie. All right, where are we at? There's so many things going on. Let's see.
Well, yeah, just like the movie, it's all over the place, so it doesn't matter which one we pick.
Let's catch up with Gene. He says he's fondling sweaters, right? Yes. Or I'm going to make fondue with cheddar.
Uh-huh.
And then as he leaves, Gary has a can of mixed vegetables and says, maybe you should talk to him. And this becomes important later when we catch up with them again. But when he says that, you're like, what the fuck did he just do?
Because you don't know exactly, is he talking to this can of vegetables? What's going on?
Yeah, or is he talking to himself in a way and just looking at the can?
Yeah.
But no, later we find out this can is sentient.
Yes.
Because I don't. It's when he says he's going to rub mud on his ass or something.
Yes, and it's the voice of H. John Benjamin.
Yeah.
So it comes a very distinctive, actor, obviously. Mm-hmm. And, he starts telling Gene that what he needs to do is admit his perversions and, be upfront about it. Whenever it slips out that you're going to rub mud on your ass, just own it.
Yeah.
He says that he...
Just be honest.
Yes, yeah. Right. And he starts to list his own perversions.
Oh my God. The can says, it's literally like a tin can of mixed vegetables with the top cut open so it can flap up and down like a mouth.
Yep.
It literally says, I can suck my own dick. And I do it a lot.
I love the addition of, and I do it a lot.
Just don't be afraid is the gist of the message. Right. But seeing this can of mixed vegetables say this, you would never expect it.
Nope.
And yes, adding the "and I do it a lot" really stamps it.
Wow, it's a good joke.
It's great. It's one of my favorite.
Right.
And Chris Maloney is like in the foreground up close to the camera, and you see the can kind of behind him talking. And it cuts to like close-ups of the can also. But like as the can's flapping away and saying this, Chris Maloney's performance is so good. He's like getting so introspective and like having a breakthrough with his emotions. It's so good. Chris Maloney's performance might be the best in the movie.
Okay. Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah, he's very funny.
Yeah. It's all great performances.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's excellent.
Right.
Where to now?
Yeah, I think that we could probably focus now on, McKinley.
Yeah.
And
Ben.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's where I want to go.
Right.
Because this is my favorite thing in the movie.
It's so wonderful, actually.
It's so well done. I've talked about subversion and bait and switches. This is my favorite bait and switch here.
Right.
So we get a scene. It's JJ and
Gary.
And Gary. They're spying on some girls. They're bathing in the lake.
Yeah, it's
in
Elizabeth
their bikinis.
Banks and some other girls, and they're taking off their clothes to get down to their swimsuits, and they're very skimpy swimsuits, and the guys are spying on them, and they want to see more.
Yeah, just like you did in a 1981 camp comedy, right?
That's right.
So McKinley walks up, Michael Ian Black's character, and is like looking. And they're like, "Oh man, look at this McKinley!" And he's like, "Well, I got something to do. I'm gonna leave." And he just leaves. And they're like, "Man, what's wrong with him? He needs a girl, man. We should hook him up. This girl will totally hook up with him." And so they're having this conversation, and we're seeing Michael Ian Black walk through the field like he's leaving, and he's going back to camp to a shed, and you're hearing them discuss how they need to get him a girlfriend and stuff while he's walking, which is. Like we haven't seen any kind of cuts like this before.
Right.
So it's a little out of place from what we've expected. And when he goes into the shed, Bradley Cooper's in there waiting for him. And they instantly like get close to each other and embrace and start kissing each other, and they start disrobing and making love.
Yeah.
And it's done in an extremely tasteful an elegant way.
Yeah.
It's not played for laughs, which is what you might expect from a stereotypical comedy like this, a camp comedy.
Uh-huh.
No, this is art house stuff.
I've seen screen caps used of, like, before they really kind of get into it, before they take their shirts off, where it's just like Michael Ian Black with his eyes shut in ecstasy as like Bradley Cooper is like kissing his neck. And I was like, wow, they really went for
Exactly,
this,
right?
This is something.
Yeah. And I mean, some of the shots are great. Like you see their feet, as they're thrusting and stuff.
Yes,
like,
right.
It's so good.
I know.
It's so good, everybody.
Yeah. It's like unexpected, certainly.
Yeah.
And what then transpires with Zach Orth and 80 Miles, like Gary and JJ, is like, they figure out, what's going on, and you think, oh no.
Yeah, because they see them they're at the beach getting married by
Yes.
Janine Garofalo. This is literally like 2 minutes later in the movie, everybody.
Right.
They're having a wedding ceremony officiated by Janine Garofalo.
And Amy Poehler has apparently like been, oh, okay, I guess I'm out. Because
Yeah,
she's like playing a penny whistle nearby,
know. And they're all wearing like flower crowns and stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very hippie vibe, you know?
Yes.
So yeah, the two guys are there behind a tree spying on the wedding, and they say, oh my God, McKinley's an F slur.
Yes.
And that's the one thing I wish they didn't put in here.
Right.
But in 1981, that is exactly what they would say.
Yep.
They could have left it out and just said something different. But they say that. And by saying that, you think, oh my God, this isn't good.
Right.
They say to each other, what are we going to do?
Yep.
Like, we got to kill this guy now.
The way they play it is, it's a comedy, so that, like, okay, whatever happens is going to, like, maybe they're going to get, it's going to be like Ben Affleck in Dazed and Confused. They're going to get, like, the paint spilled on them
They'll
or whatever.
get theirs.
Right.
Yeah.
But instead what happens is, like, we cut to the mess hall, and, like, Ben and McKinley are, like, kind of out in the open.
Yeah, they're
like,
just sitting there
They're just
talking.
sitting there, and they're talking to somebody else, and everybody kind of knows they're a couple. And, like, JJ and Gary walk in in a threatening manner, and then they say, guys, this is for you. And we didn't know what to get you. And it was like, they have a chaise lounge, and it's like, They got something from Crate and Barrel, and they just wanted to make sure, oh, is this really what you want? They're really sweet giving him gifts.
We didn't know if you already had one, though.
That's right,
Like,
yes.
It's so funny because they come into the doorway. Hey,
Yes.
McKinley and Ben, this is for you. And you're like, what are they going to do here?
Right.
And then you see them carrying this giant Crate and Barrel box. Oh, it's a Chase Lounge. We didn't know if you already had one. It's so good.
They buy him a really sweet wedding present.
I know,
and they're
right?
really happy for them.
Because what do you do when you see one of your friends getting married? You get them a nice
You get
present.
them a nice gift.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And you wish them well.
and that's what happens.
And like this movie decided that, even though they kind of cheated by making it look like JJ and Gary were going to do something bad,
Yeah.
they remind you, number one, it's a comedy, so that's not going to happen. But also, they wanted to send a message to everybody watching it that going, hey, everybody's cool with this.
Right. Who cares?
Right.
Get them a present.
Yes. Let's make this a
And
non-issue.
I just love how it's a giant Chase Lounge. Like,
I know, like it's gonna be kind of a pain in the ass to get this back to town.
and like it's a deeper joke too, because these are supposed to be like teenage kids, right?
right.
They don't have a house. Like, where are they going to put furniture? They don't live together, right?
No,
like it's
no.
just and they're married, of course. That's another layer to this joke that makes no sense. That's why it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so deep when you really think about it. You're like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And that's the joke.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense.
But I mean, I guess because we can see that the actors are all 26 years old, we just go with it.
Exactly. I want one of those seats. I want one.
Oh yeah, it's probably a pretty nice chair.
I bet. It's
Yeah.
Crate and Barrel. Yeah. But yeah, that's my favorite gag in the movie. When,
Okay.
When they say, this is for you. And then they're like, it's Chase Lounge. We didn't know if you had one, though. It's so good.
I think it might be my favorite too. Yeah,
Okay.
it's very good.
It's awesome. We get a scene of Qube like trying to rile up a baseball team, like a typical camp movie.
Yes,
This inspirational speech.
Right, and I really can't remember. I'm trying to remember now how it ends. Do they all decide to give up and not play the game? Is that what happens?
Yeah, he gives this whole big speech, like, hey, we can beat the camp that wins every year,
Yeah.
and they're all good, and we're not. And, it's all stereotypical shit he's saying.
Right.
And then after he says, he's like, well, what do you say? Then the kids are like, well, that sounds kind of trite, Yeah, that's well-worn territory. He goes, well, what do you want to do? It's like, wait, we just don't want to play. And he goes, oh, all right. And the bus pulls up, and he
With the other team,
and he
right.
runs like way into the background where the bus is, and you see him talk to the coach that gets out, and like they're like kind of doing whatever, and then the coach gets back on the bus, and Michael Showalter runs back up into the foreground with the camera. He's like, all right, I explained everything. They're cool. And that's it. Pretty good.
Yes,
pretty
that is a good joke. I wish it was fresher in my mind, but it was, yeah.
That's okay. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. We catch up with the kids on the raft at one point too.
Yeah, we keep cutting back to them.
Yeah,
sometimes.
like they're at a waterfall now.
Yes.
And Neil and Victor finally get back to camp. Victor wants to make out with Abby, and she's already making out with like 10 other guys. So,
well, okay,
right
now, we cut back to before that happens with Victor. Before getting back to camp, we cut back to him a couple more times when like it's gradually getting darker and darker, and like he's getting more and more wounded, kind of like he's like there's like cuts on his face and his body's taking a beating. And when he finally does get back to camp, it's nighttime now, and they're just about to start the talent show, and she is making out with like an 11-year-old.
I know, right?
I don't think it's actually happening. Like Marissa Ryan didn't actually have to kiss this kid.
You don't see it. It's not like the tongues we've been talking about. It's
just
her face is in front of his face. So
it's implied that she is like, with a
right. The character's supposed to be like 16 or whatever.
Yes.
And okay, I guess you could do that legally, but
I mean, that would not be against the law, but it's still pretty. It's a gross joke.
Yeah, I'm not into it.
No.
So he sees this, and she says, "You snooze, you lose." To him. And so he did all this for nothing, I guess.
Yes.
But Neil shows up on the motorcycle here, and it's the stuntman who pulls in, and the camera pans to Janine Garofalo, and she goes, "Oh, Neil," and then it pans back, and it's Joe Latrulio there.
That is a great joke. Yeah. To acknowledge it and then cut away to Janine Garofalo and then cut back to Joe Latrulio, fantastic.
Yeah, and they know Victor's back, and they don't know where he is. And this is a joke I don't really love. They go on a rampage where they destroy the infirmary.
Yeah. Right.
Trying to find the phone or something.
Yes.
It is a little too much for me.
So my wife was on the couch while I was watching this movie. She was in the same room with me, but she wasn't watching it. She was just like, reading a book or something. And at one point, at this moment, she asked me to pause it, and she goes, "Help me out." I said, "Okay." She goes, "What is this?" I said, "What do you mean?" She was pointing like the tenor of this scene, like, what are they doing? I said, "Well, look, it's just this is absurdist humor, and now this is like taking it to another level, and it's also just, I guess, like it's parodying scenes of this kind that were dramatic in other movies." Where like someone OD'd or something, or so it's like they're doing Panic in Needle Park, but it's instead it's Janine Garofalo just like carrying on, and the whole thing of like just destroying all the medication and also just knocking things over intentionally
for no reason.
Yeah, for no reason.
Yeah.
But my wife was flummoxed.
I do like at the very end after they find the phone or whatever. Joe Latrulio has one more. He like accidentally bumps into a lamp and then like elbows it.
Yes,
I think that was not meant to happen, and he just did it.
It didn't look intentional.
It looked improvised.
Yes, right.
That was my favorite part.
Right. But I agree with you that like maybe this scene also is a little lesser than others.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Let's see here. Let's catch up with Qube and Katie.
Yes.
So there's a few scenes of them like talking intimately about her and Andy and like what Qube likes and stuff. She wants to hook him up with a girl.
Right.
That's kind of what the thing is here. And then she ends up kind of falling for him. And the scenes are good enough, like where you see like, well, she likes him now a little bit.
Yeah.
You can tell. And he's a likable guy. Mm-hmm. And they ultimately end up kissing each other, like making out in a barn somewhere.
Yeah, and they have a good comedy scene of like exchanging jackets and flannels.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. They exchange each other's coats because they're both cold at different points. And they're then just wearing different coats.
And then at one point, Qube has both garments on.
Yeah, and one's like wrapped around his like head.
And she's sitting there sleeveless, like, "Okay, Qube, I'm very cold now." He's like, "Well, but I'm pretty cold too."
That's pretty good. You want my flannel?
Yeah.
So she has his flannel on. Yeah, it's just Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. It's funny though how
It
they swap these clothing pieces.
Right.
It's a great play on that worn out.
Yeah,
thing,
because
you know?
like it's always the man takes off his coat and puts it on like the woman who's got to chill, you know,
Right,
and it's
and
very gentlemanly and chivalrous.
He's just wearing that like tiny pink sweater. Like it's pretty great. Because Michael Showalter's a tall, big guy.
He
you
is,
know,
right? Yes.
Oh man, but yeah, they make out, and then there's a scene of her telling him like, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done this. This is after Qube calls his parents, say, I met a girl. He's telling everybody, I gotta. This is the one.
He really jumps the gun. Dude.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all done it. We've kissed someone we liked, and then
you told the world,
or we thought something more than what it was, and got ahead of ourselves, and then turns out, no, that's not it at all.
Yeah,
calm down.
My God, it's happened way more than I'd like to admit.
Yes, right. Yes, I'm a sucker for that. Janine Garofalo's like, Qube, maybe you should just wait a little bit,
right?
And he's like, yeah, right, okay. Yeah, so Katie tells him, it was a mistake. I have a boyfriend, Andy, and I like him, and I shouldn't have done that.
I'll say one thing about myself anyway. I never called my parents.
Me neither.
Yeah,
I never called. Hey, Dad, remember how you're worried about me meeting girls?
Come on. No.
Is that a real thing? Do people actually do that?
I would never do that.
Gosh.
I just kissed a girl and there
First
were sparks.
thing I need to do is call Mom and Dad.
Come on. I don't want Mom and Dad knowing about any of that stuff.
Hey, Dad, guess who I fucked? No, I'm not doing that. I'm not calling them. Sorry.
Right. It's a weird move.
Right. Gosh. So this kind of gets him all dejected now because he thought he had, the love of his life here now.
Yeah.
And we get some more scenes of him like spilling his guts out to her and all that kind of stuff. And Christopher Maloney has been like reformed now. Like he's still crazy,
yes,
but he's kind of realized who he is.
Right.
And so he shows up next to Qube while he's crying, just he just like appears in frame next to him.
Yes.
It's kind of weird.
Yes.
And he's like, I'm going to have to teach you the ways. I don't know what he's talking about, but that's all he says. And then you get a montage of Christopher Maloney training him like it's Rocky.
And it's weird training because it's a lot of dance moves.
Yeah.
It's almost like like Chris Penn and Kevin Bacon in Footloose.
Yeah.
And then there's like at one point Gary comes in and he joins in and they're doing like they're in a dance studio actually, full on just doing choreographed moves.
They're totally parodying those 80s movies like that.
Of course, yeah. And like that's the training. Like whatever advice Qube needed,
yes,
is just like I'm going to teach you to dance.
And like after a little bit of it, and it switches to where he's wearing the same outfit as Gene.
Yes,
that like cut off midriff. Oh,
I mean, and he even like really accentuates it with like this fancy Baryshnikov move where he like lifts his arms and so you can really see the sinews of his abs,
But he's just this lanky dude, and Chris Maloney's like jacked.
Right,
so
of course.
It's pretty good looking. Like the two of them next to each other wearing the same outfit.
Yes, you can tell one of them has a lot of physical development and the other is just a young guy who hasn't, he
hasn't worked out much at all.
Yes, right.
Yeah. He just writes comedies. Yeah.
He can still pull off a bare midriff though.
But yes, he can. But the scene is funny. I think it's a good parody of the montage like that. It ends with a freeze frame high five, you know. So now I guess he's got the confidence to talk to Katie. Right.
And like he kind of goes away for a minute, and I guess what we've been not neglecting because it's hard with this movie.
The movie's all over.
Yeah. David Hyde Pierce throughout all this, whenever we cut away to him and the indoor kids, they're doing experiments. Like he's showing them, how to like, use this stuff to like, looking through the telescope and like talking about the solar system and everything. And like Janine Garofalo will periodically come over and they'll walk hand in hand and, oh, it's time for lunch. Well, we'll see you later. And it's obvious that their relationship is blooming, but more importantly, like he's making a connection with these kids, and they make this discovery that some space debris is going to like land on the camp and destroy everything.
There's one moment like before they reveal that, like I think Janine Garofalo like walks away and he looks up at the sky and he says something like, "Not yet" or something. And it's like, what is he doing?
Now, at what point does he utter his most famous line in the film?
It's here when he tells Beth what's happening.
Ah, that's right. Which one of us gets to say it?
I can say it.
Very well, go for it.
He says, Beth, tomorrow is the least of our worries. And then she says, don't even tell me you have crabs. And he goes, no. Well, yes, but that's not the point. Well, what is the point? It's so funny because it's out of nowhere. Is that the line you're talking about?
Yours is 1, mine's 1A.
Oh.
It's when he sees the readout of the experiment, and it wasn't what he expected, and he says, oh, fuck my cock.
Oh, my God. There's a lot of good ones.
I mean...
He's excellent.
He's so good.
His performance is so good.
And I hope he got to say that line 6 times, because I mean, like, he can nail everything in one take because he's a great actor, but I mean, like, that is such a powerful image, you know. Yeah,
I'm sure they did multiple takes because everyone else broke.
Absolutely,
I bet.
Yes, there was like audible laughter on the soundtrack. Okay, David, we got to do it again, but could you be not so great when you say that?
Yes,
you know?
be worse. They build this machine, this homemade machine. It's MacGyvered together with like cereal boxes and hangers.
Oh my God, there's like tasty cakes in there.
Yes,
yeah.
There's actual donuts stacked on each other.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yes.
And it's this machine that can try to redirect the piece of Skylab.
Yeah, right. And this is all part of the, like, they're gonna do this during the talent show.
Right, yeah, because it's revealed here, they've located where it's gonna land. It's gonna land on the rec hall, where the talent show is gonna happen.
Right.
Conveniently. Yep. Inconveniently, actually. And right after he says the crabs line, Janine Garofalo is like, well, tell me what it is. He's like, now is not the time or place. Meet me in 10 seconds at the picnic table.
Oh, man.
And then he leaves the frame, and the camera sits there with Beth for 10 seconds, and then we pan over about 4 feet to the picnic table, and she walks over to him. He's in like a lab coat. All the kids are there with telescopes and everything. It's pretty good. And he's like, okay, Beth, remember when I said to meet me here in 10 seconds? This joke could have failed so easily, but it works.
I think David Hyde Pierce and Leslie Nielsen can do this.
Yes, that's about it.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, he really makes it sing.
And then this is when he reveals, hey, it's going to fall on the rec hall. We got to do something about it. And then they decide to build that device.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, we then get to the talent show where we see, like, a bunch of stuff going on. And, like, throughout the talent show, they have this MC.
Alan Shemper.
Alan Shemper, who's also played by Michael Showalter.
Yeah.
He's wearing, like, old man makeup. And he's doing, like, kind of this Borscht Belt humor.
Yeah.
That is just a massive hit with all these counselors and kids.
Yeah.
And at one point, they cut to Michael Ian Black, and him selling the MC's jokes is like Julia Louis-Dreyfus level.
Yeah.
You know, he is like, he's a great laugher.
Dude, the whole crowd is just dying from these jokes. And these are not good jokes either.
No.
That's part of the joke.
That's part of the joke.
This old man is like, I went to camp with the dinosaurs. And Michael Ian Black's like,
oh man, he's just like,
Yeah.
he's absolutely like side splitting.
Yes.
Like, this is the best jokes he's ever heard.
Yeah.
And yeah, he says something about like how, you know, I'm so old that when I was in camp, Jesus Christ was my counselor, you know?
We had to eat eggs, pterodactyl eggs. And everyone is just like, oh my God.
Yeah, just holding their ribs like they can't take it, you know? I mean, it's really funny.
It's so good. And they have similar reactions to all the performances. Like, we see a lot of the skits and stuff that the kids are doing. Everyone's really cheering them on and happy.
There's one kid who does some stand-up that everybody finds great.
He does like a Kid Rock bit. Or Chris Rock bit.
Yeah. Hopefully not a Kid Rock bit. Yes.
What the hell? We're talking about kids, so Kid came out.
Yes,
Sorry.
right.
Don't do a Kid Rock bit.
Absolutely
Anybody.
not.
Never do that.
No, yes.
Someone comes out singing Ball with the Ball. Oh, dude.
You know, that would be the least of our problems if all they did was sing Ball with the Ball. But
Yeah,
you know.
that's the least worst thing about Kid Rock.
But yeah, he's doing the whole, like, you know, white people be like this and black people be like this.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's, man. At one point, I think like when they're laughing, Michael Ian Black looks at Zach Orth and goes, "Yeah, he's right. I hate white people."
Oh my God, it's so good. Oh my God. And then we get to see the skit where Susie comes out and says, "Everyone here sucks dick."
Yes.
And we see them perform day by day.
Right.
And it's actually really good.
It's a good, like...
It's a great kid performance of it.
I mean, because, like, they're kind of singing in a non-committal mode like you would as a kid.
Yeah.
But, like, then they get more and more into it, and it's like, hey, this is actually all right.
Yeah, and, like, the lead, like, she's really good at it.
Yeah.
And she's got a great voice. And the crowd is all, like, swaying back and
Yes.
forth, like, and singing along, you know, and, like, really into it and having a great time. And then the curtains drop and they all go, boo! It's like, they're, like, throwing shit. Like, they hate it, which is... They were just having a great time.
I know. They turn on it very quickly.
I guess Susie told them they suck dick. So
That's true.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And at this point, Qube shows up. He like kicks the doors open, and he's in this Christopher Maloney outfit.
Yes.
And everything stops, you know,
Uh-huh.
because the cool guy has just walked into the room.
Why don't you turn me loose?
The music cues in this movie are excellent. And like he just starts strutting up to Katie, and the camera is just like zooming into her face.
Yes.
She's like, "Who is this stud?"
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it works in the moment.
Yeah.
She walks out and, you know, like she flags him down because he declares what he wants to say.
Yeah.
And then he walks out in a cool guy way.
Yeah.
So she runs after him.
He says, "I'm leaving. I've done a lot of growing up since we last talked." You know?
Yes, this is 2 hours ago. And, and like, she comes out to meet him and, you know, she says, "I love you, Gerald Cooperberg."
Excellent name. And they kiss. And, oh man! And before she leaves, he like he gives her this little tiny box. Like it looks like you might be able to fit a watch in it.
Right.
It's like a going away present. And he leaves all cool. And she like sits there and she opens it. And she pulls out of Hammer Space his flannel jacket.
That's right.
It's so great. Out of this tiny little box.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that. That might be the best gag in the movie.
It's pretty good.
And even like for a technical like sight gag, that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what triggers it. She's like, "Oh my God, I am in love with this man."
Man. Yeah, pulling that flannel out of the little ring box, that is so good.
Yeah. So I guess they're in love now.
Yeah.
And as this is happening, there's been this really nerdy guy called Steve who's been wandering around camp speaking in a robot voice.
Yes.
He's like JP from Grandma's Boy.
Yes, Kevin Sussman plays Steve, the robot.
Yes, he's
accented
in the
guy.
movie.
Yes, and he talks like this, and it's like a moon man or whatever. And oh man, did you ever know a kid like that?
Yeah, I think I've met a few of them.
Yeah, I knew
maybe not to that extent, but there were kids like that.
So yeah, the one I knew didn't quite do that all the time, but I remember him one time answering when someone asked him how old he was. He said 15 Earth years.
Oh, dude.
You know, and I was like, oh man,
all right,
yep, come on, dude.
Yep, that guy.
Yes,
he's an indoor kid.
Yeah, he's an indoor kid.
Yeah, this Steve guy though, like he got encouragement earlier from Beth to do something, you know, and stop talking like a robot, you know? So she tells him, like, you need to be in the talent show. And Susie gets pissed about it, actually, which is really funny. And she's like, "I don't appreciate you undermining my authority." And Beth just, like, looks at her and is like, "Shut the fuck up."
Yes.
It's great.
Yes.
So, yeah, he's in the talent show. He's last. And he comes out and he, like, is wearing goggles and shit. And he raises his hands to the sky and points them out in front of him. Almost like he's shooting lightning out of his fingers or something.
Yes.
Starts like twisting his hands, convulsing a little bit. And the wind kicks up. Like the whole cafeteria starts, the wind gusts everywhere. And it starts blowing campers like against the wall. And papers are flying everywhere. And outside the trees are shaking. And Qube and Katie, like the wind's blowing around them.
Yeah.
And it's just, it comes out of nowhere. And also... The indoor kids and Henry are working on their machine to get Skylab. So, like, all this craziness is happening at the same time because the impact is imminent. So it's like the climax of the film, really.
Right. Yes. And they all... They don't know that Henry and the indoor kids are, like, you know, saving humanity outside.
Right.
And they think that this is all Steve's doing.
Yeah.
That he has terrible power. you know.
I love that. Yeah. And do you think it is due to the Skylab getting close?
I think that's what it is.
That's probably what it really is.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, it's very convenient for the talent show. And also, too, it's a weird thing. It's one of these things where every time I think something doesn't work, I think, well, maybe that was the joke. Is that like when Beth was telling Susie about, how she's going to put Steve in the production, she's like, fine, I'll put him on last. I was like, put him on last?
That's where you put the best.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, but she acts like it's, like a thing. Okay, yeah, nobody's going to want to
Everyone
see it.
will have left already.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's where Metallica goes.
Exactly. Not Steve the robot guy.
Right, that's right.
So if Steve had no clue the Skylab was going to fall and cause a windstorm, what was his talent? Just shaking his arms around?
Pretty much. He was standing up there doing some, hand dancing.
Like a mad scientist routine.
Right. And it wasn't even hand dancing. That was generous. No, he's moving his hands in some kind of way and doing, gestures. And I don't know what he's doing.
Out straight in front of him, and he's kind of convulsing.
Yes. That was his act.
Talent. Right. But JJ's getting blown against the wall, like stools are flying everywhere.
Yeah.
And as soon as the wind dies down, Skylab falls into the open field, and you get a huge crash, and you see it crash, which is cool. And they're like, "Yeah, we did it." And we see everyone inside the building kind of get up, from the floor they've been thrown to, and look around like, "Oh my god." And then we get JJ starting a slow clap.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think is another joke.
Yes, very much so.
Because, they're playing on that. Zach Orth gets up and is just bewildered, doesn't know what to do, and starts slow clapping.
I mean, because I think... I know they were going for a joke, and I know they were using a trope and a stereotype, but I think in that moment would call for starting a slow clap.
I agree.
If there was ever a time where it deserved,
That is a slow clap moment.
Yes.
And that ends the night, really.
Yes.
So we see the next day after this, and everyone's kind of waking up, getting ready to leave summer camp, hugging, and I don't know about you, but I actually felt the sentiment of it. I felt like, man, we're leaving camp. It's kind of sad, Well, I wasn't crying or anything.
Okay,
but it's I felt like, oh, there's that longing, you're going to miss your friends.
If you made friends with somebody and you, first day at camp, you became best friends with somebody, and then, 2 months went by, you spent all your time together, and then they lived in another state, and you have to say goodbye to them, I mean, that would be tough.
And you might write letters.
Right.
That's the best you could do?
Yep.
Yeah. The movie... Yeah, it's ridiculous and insane and absurd.
Yes.
But there's sprinkles of this real emotions in there. Very little throughout the film.
And the times that they do try to kind of have real emotion, they'll undo it with comedy because that's what you do in a comedy.
Yeah.
And my favorite bit of that was earlier in the day when the counselors are just gathered on a stoop somewhere in front of a cabin, and they're talking about hey, we all know each other and we're all friends here. Why don't we make a commitment to get together again 10 years from now?
Yes.
And they're like, okay, yeah. Why don't we make it for we'll be here at 9:00, and then they get into this thing about we'll make it here by 9:30 maybe. And well, no, we're gonna be in our 20s by then. We should be able to get here on time. We'll make it our business to get here on time. And then Michael Ian Black goes, well, can we make it 11? I already got something at 9.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good.
That's great.
They're all sitting there like, okay, yeah. It's really funny, and it's a throwaway scene that just takes place, and it's. It's making a joke of that stereotype, right? We're all going to see each other. We're all going to stay friends, right?
Yep.
Which they never do.
Yes. And I forgot, too, that, part of the bit, too, was that when he mentioned, his appointment that he's got 10 years from now, he's already moved it twice.
Yeah. That sounds like an improv.
It's got to be, that is Michael Ian Black all over.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
So it's the next day, and we catch up with Henry and Beth, and they're standing there in the field saying goodbye, and Henry says, I got a job in Florida, and Beth gets this kind of sad look on her face, and he goes, well, but they said it's an apartment for 2, and Beth is like, oh, yeah, And he goes, and I know we've been having trouble conceiving. And I just want you to know. And Beth stops him and it's like, no, don't worry, Henry. It's happened. It's finally happened. And they're like, oh, yes, thank God. And they hug. It's like their relationship has escalated to this point in less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
I think it's super hilarious.
Because Janine Garofalo and David Hyde Pierce are both really talented comedians and actors, and they sell this material.
Yep.
Like, they make you believe it, and they make you enthusiastic about this ridiculous scenario.
Right. If you took this scene without any context from the rest of the movie and changed the music, it would fit into a very serious drama.
You're right, yes. Because that's how they play it.
Same exact performance.
Yeah. You're right.
They're that good.
Right.
And then this is where we see Molly Shannon and the kid, and
I'll skip over that.
we actually see Gene leaving in a car in some convertible, and he like looks at the can of mixed vegetables and mouths "thank you" to the vegetables.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Because I think he'd gotten back together with his wife. We saw her briefly at the talent show. Like, she's sitting next to him, and he's wearing like these these really tight white disco pants and this crazy shirt.
Yeah, it's a different outfit.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because she's sitting in the passenger seat.
Right.
That's true. And then we get the scene that you were alluding to earlier.
Yes.
With Katie and Qube.
Yes. So Qube has already told his parents that him and Katie are an item. And he believes that okay, yeah, this is who I'm spending the rest of my life with. Me and my 16-year-old girlfriend. I'm 16 too, and this is how it goes. And she tells him she's had a lot of thinking about this, since last night. Last night was great, Qube, but the fact is, Andy's really hot. I know he's an asshole, and he is a big asshole. We haven't gotten into that, but he is, I just want to jump his bones. I want to fuck his brains out, she says. That's all I think about all the time. And I'm 16, and that's all I care about. Maybe 10 years from now, I'll think about like wanting to be with a nice guy, but at this point, it's all about sex. So I'll see you later, Qube.
Yep. And
he's just like, he has to deal with it.
And he's standing there kind of like, he doesn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And then Andy pulls up with his chauffeur, I guess.
Yes.
And he's like, Katie, let's go. And she just gets in the car with him. It's Paul Rudd.
I mean, and Paul Rudd, obviously, he is one of the most likable presences in cinema.
Yes.
Famously,
Yeah.
So he has to really make an effort for you not to like him. And he does it. He pulls it off in this movie.
Yeah.
And he does it in a joking way because it's not like, he's, it's not Ray Winstone,
No,
not like that.
He's channeling the Brian Fantana from Anchorman.
There it is.
That's kind of what it is.
Pretty much.
In a way.
Yes.
But he's such a jerk, and he's so inconsiderate to everyone.
Yes.
And completely selfish. He's a very unlikable character. And I almost don't even like the performance just because I don't like the character so much in a way.
I'm kind of with you there.
Yeah.
Like it gets tiresome, and he's never...
It's one note.
It is, very much so. And like there is one scene I kind of like, but it doesn't involve any like romantic stuff. It's when Janine Garofalo makes him clean up his mess. It's more Janine Garofalo is funny than him.
Her straight man performance is top notch.
It's awesome.
Because Paul Rudd is just chewing this scene where he's trying to pick up the milk he threw on the ground, and he keeps failing, and he's throwing the tray around, and he's acting like a petulant child. But it's this teenage... It's Paul Rudd, who's already in his 20s, probably.
Yeah.
And
he was 32 when he made this movie.
He's playing like a 16-year-old.
Right.
Who's acting like a 6-year-old. And Janine Garofalo is just standing there as this happens.
And she's
stone-faced.
And she's not going to stop. She's not going to walk away and not going to let him get away with this. He's cleaning up his shit. Because he just threw his food on the floor.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And like... Earlier, he also had an anti-gay slur. Him and Katie are making out, and then she's like, well, so I'll see you later? And he goes, oh, God, you're suffocating me. And then he goes, fuck you, lesbian, slur.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Okay, that's a good joke, guys. At one point, he cheats on Katie with Elizabeth Banks.
Yeah.
It's actually Elizabeth Banks' funniest moment in the movie where, I mean, she's actually got a couple of them, but when she walks up with all that barbecue sauce on her face.
That's pretty good.
And she's just like, what? What's the problem?
She's holding a rib in one hand. still got meat on the bone. It's excellent. And she's in this like really skimpy pink bikini.
I know. She looks amazing, but she's got sauce all over her face.
I know, she's covered in Sweet Baby Ray's.
And she wants to make out, but he is kind of like, well, you got a little something here, you know?
Yeah.
She's like, okay, whatever, you know?
And he's like, fine, but not here. Clearly. Pretty good.
Oh, man.
Yeah, she's good in the movie.
Yes.
She doesn't have a lot to do, but that's kind of her thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. And then, I mean, that's pretty much the end of the movie. There's a scene when they're all leaving camp of the indoor kids laying in that go fish circle.
Yeah,
And
that is cool.
They're talking about how like this was the best 24 hours of my life and you're my best friends and stuff like that. I really like the sentiment.
really nice.
Like I said, that's one of the moments I'm like, yeah, that's great, you know.
And they even did kind of like what the kids did for Gail with Henry, because like he tells them that like at the university he's an associate professor, and they're like, well, what does that mean? And he goes, well, children, it means that I'm less than. And they all kind of console him.
They're all crying.
Yes.
I love it. I'm less than. Well, I guess technically that's true.
I mean, yes, because he's not a tenured professor.
It's great. The way he makes it sound, though, is that he's struggling with racism since he was born.
I know,
you know?
exactly.
Like,
Yes,
that's
like
the level he brings it
he's
to.
really oppressed. You
Yeah.
know? Right.
It's pretty good.
Yep.
Oh, man. And we get the credits.
Yep.
And then after the credits, did you watch the post-credits?
I didn't.
The post-credits lasts about 5 seconds.
Okay.
It says 10 years later.
Okay.
And all the counselors are hanging out at the cabin.
Oh.
And I forget who it is. I think it might be Zach Orth shows up. He's like, sorry, I'm 5 minutes late, everybody. I thought we were meeting at 9:30. And then Amy Poehler says, no, we're meeting at 9 so we can be here at 9:30. And that's the scene.
Oh, my God.
And they're all dressed like, you know, mid-90s adults.
Okay.
Like,
Wow.
like professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My God. I got to see this.
It's a very short scene, but it's funny.
I always stay around for the credits.
It pays off the setup from earlier.
Damn it.
Well, now you got homework.
Yes, I sure do.
You could YouTube it for, you know, it'll take you about 30 seconds to do the whole thing.
I will do that, yes.
Oh, dude. Well, Dave, do you have anything else?
Well, Roger Ebert gave this movie 1 star, which wasn't surprising. Thumbs down, of course.
Yeah.
What was surprising is the review he wrote in the Chicago Sun-Times. I have read most of Roger Ebert's output from 1968 till his death. This is unquestionably the worst review he ever wrote.
Okay.
It's not a review. He wrote parody lyrics to Hello Mother, Hello Father,
Oh, my gosh.
talking about what he doesn't like about this movie.
Okay. That sucks.
It
Yeah,
sucks.
that is...
I was mad at Roger Ebert because I kind of discovered, you know, like, I didn't get to read his stuff until the internet happened, you
Yeah.
know, because I didn't grow up in Chicago, and I didn't buy the big, thick book, the compendiums,
Right.
because I was just a kid, you know.
Yeah.
So when they had the archive, like, on Sun-Times website in, like, the year 2000, or what, you know, whenever it started, over the next few years or whatever, I started to read, you know, going all the way back, and then I started reading about modern movies, and I was all excited to read about, you know, movies I'd seen, and when I got to Wet Hot American Summer, I was like, okay, here we go. Oh, he didn't like it. Well, that's unfortunate. Well, let's check it out still. No. I get this. There's like weird, you know, Alan Sherman lyrics. Everything else he ever did was great, but
what a horrible choice.
I know.
Why would you do that?
I don't know. It's the only like truly bad choice he ever made as far as like his film review column, you know? He only did this kind of thing once, and it happened to be on this movie.
Maybe after this happened, they were like, you know,
I hope so.
You should not do that ever again.
Yes, I hope his editor, like, I know that Roger Ebert by that time was like the most famous film critic on earth who probably has ever lived, you know, so I'm sure that the editor at the Sun-Times probably didn't feel powerful enough to kind of, Roger, that sucked, you know, but I hope that they did, because, like, it sucked.
Yeah, I'm
You know?
sure his integrity was questioned after
Yes,
that.
of
And that's
course.
probably why he didn't do it again.
I hope so. Yes. Right.
Oh, man. Awesome. So, Dave, would you recommend this movie?
Yeah, people can check out Wet Hot American Summer. You'll have a nice time.
Yeah, it's a great absurdist comedy. I
Mm-hmm.
would totally recommend it if you're into that kind of thing. And it's cool to see this cast in 2001
I know.
just all put together. You know, you'll find something here you like. I'm
That's
sure.
true. And I just realized too that there was something else with like that's kind of related to this, but like, did you ever hear of Cheap Seats without Ron Parker?
No.
Okay, so Randy and Jason Sklar hosted one of my favorite shows back in the 2000s. It was called Cheap Seats Without Ron Parker. It aired on ESPN Classic, and it was the same format as MST3K, except that they weren't riffing over movies. They were riffing over like the filler programs ESPN used to air in the 80s and 90s, like darts and billiards and roller derby. And like tons of people from this movie make appearances in this show.
Oh, wow.
Like as just they're playing characters, because they have like kind of cutaways that are just like these sketches. And Michael Showalter plays the titular Ron Parker.
This sounds amazing.
It's so good. Yeah, it's real. It's in full on YouTube right now. You can watch the
I've
whole
got
thing.
homework now.
Yes, dude, right. But yeah, and it's surprising that the Sklar brothers are not in this movie, because like they knew all these guys, and I mean maybe they just didn't meet Michael Showalter and David Wayne until after 2001. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that wraps things up. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcast. Rate it, review it, and most of all, share it. It gets more dudes listening to the dudes, and you can go to dudesonmovies.com and find anything you need right there.
Yes, and we're on Facebook, Blue Sky, TikTok, and Instagram. Just look for Dudes on Movies, and our email address is dudesonmovies@gmail.com.
That's right. And Dave, we have a question of the week. What is the question of the week?
What are your favorite movies about summer camp?
Hey, there you go. There's lots to choose from. Hit us up. Let us know your choice. And stay tuned next week when we do 2022's The Menu, directed by Mark Mylod and starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Rafe Fiennes. So until next week, I'm your dude Scott.
I'm your dude Dave.
And we'll see you next time.